You're quite right. A pilgrim, 1543, says, "A brief note about the Council of Constantinople on phyletism and the Bulgarian question in 1872 may be helpful. I'm not confident that all your subscribers will know the term, and this is because I mentioned that Patriarch Kirill, the man with the big cars and the huge cufflinks, all gold, the chain smoker who's been photographed on a boat surrounded by, in swimming trunks, surrounded by women, and who seems to have so many non-clerical activities. At one point, I believe he was part of the KGB. Well, maybe that is clerical in certain areas of the Russian Orthodox Church. I must say, I know a Russian Orthodox senior cleric. He was at Oxford, and I liked him, and Hilarion. We haven't been in touch recently, and I have no idea what he thinks of his master's voice. But you're quite right. We need to talk about the Council of Constantinople, and it addressed the ecclesiastical and theological controversy of nationalism, which was called phyletism, a term describing the conflation of church and nation, or more specifically, the organization of church structures along ethnic or national lines rather than territorial or canonical boundaries. And the council was convened in response to the so-called Bulgarian question, a dispute that arose after the establishment of the Bulgarian Exarch or the Bulgarian Exarchate in 1870. In the late 19th century, as nationalist movements swept across Europe and the Ottoman Empire, Bulgarians sought independence, not just politically but ecclesiastically, and they accused the Greek-dominated ecumenical patriarchate of suppressing their national identity by restricting the use of the Bulgarian language in the liturgy, in the church services, and the administration. In 1870, under pressure from Bulgarian nationalists and the Ottoman government, a Bulgarian exarchate was established, effectively creating a parallel ecclesiastical structure independent of the patriarchate. Now, the creation of this exarchate was condemned as a breach of Orthodox canonical unity, and effectively it was schismatic. And in 1872, the ecumenical patriarch convened the Council of Constantinople to address the issue and the broader implications of what was termed phyletism. And the council declared phyletism a heresy, emphasizing that the church should transcend ethnic, linguistic, and national divisions. And it reaffirmed the universal and inclusive nature of the church, asserting that ecclesiastical boundaries should follow canonical traditions rather than new ethnic or national boundaries. And it excommunicated the Bulgarian hierarchy, the entire hierarchy, from the archbishop right the way down. And the leaders of the Bulgarian exarchate effectively were isolated from the broader Orthodox communion. This excommunication lasted until the early 20th century, when steps were taken to reconcile the Bulgarian Orthodox Church with the ecumenical patriarchate. Now, what this means in practice is that excessive nationalism is to be condemned in the Orthodox Church, and that there is a canon and a council that specifically makes that condemnation. So the activity of Archbishop Christodoulus, who was sort of my nemesis back about 20 years ago, who stood. I went to see him and I asked for his help, and that evening he went on television. I asked for his help about a migrant who was Turkish, and he went on television and he said, "Oli Turki ni varvari, all Turks are barbarians. If you are Greek, you are Orthodox. If you are Orthodox, you are Greek." Complete rubbish, of course. I am Orthodox. I'm Greek Orthodox, but I am not Greek. And I was really quite irritated by this. And my local bishop in Oxford sent me a little postcard and said, "You are ploughing You are ploughing very choppy waters, he said. And I was very grateful to receive the postcard because I was feeling quite unnerved. And I'd had a correspondence in the local Greek newspaper about the precise nature of the filioque and one or two other rather obscure theological discussions, which suddenly became very, very animated and relevant. And people got quite sort of shirty about it. And eventually the Archbishop's office, an archimandrite, called me and suggested I went in, which I did, and his compromise was to set up an English-speaking liturgy in his sort of personal house in the Archbishop's palace, which then took place. And who was it now? An English English Orthodox priest did the liturgy, and we knew each other, but sadly he's now died. What was his name? Athanasius? No, it wasn't Athanasius. Anyway, we'll come back. But the point was, Archbishop Christodoulus was, I thought, guilty of phyletism, and I was quite outspoken about it, of course. And then I found there were further threats from the Greek navy, and I felt obliged to leave Greece. In fact, the Turkish ambassador called me, and we fled in the middle of the night by bus with the cat and lots of luggage. It was terrifying, actually. And we went into Turkey, and within a month, it was possible to come back to the UK, and I was greatly relieved. And the case, the legal case which I was pursuing, went to the European Court of Human Rights. We won, and Greece has still not changed its laws, which it promised to do. But the big issue there was Christodoulus, I felt. If with help from Christodoulus, we would have been significantly more supported, and Christodoulus was too focused on his nationalism to be focused on his responsibility as a priest and as a bishop. And when you go to confession to hierarchs in the Orthodox Church, and you're kneeling before them, and they put their omophorium over your head, and they say, "And I, an unworthy bishop, do here absolve you." Well, deeply unworthy in this case was the Christodoulus, deeply unworthy. And when somebody becomes a bishop in the Orthodox Church, you cry, so worthy, 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 axios, axios. Well, I don't think that was the case. Or if he was once worthy, he wasn't by the time I knew him. Because he was infected with this heresy. And so too is Patriarch Kirill of Russia, infected with this heresy. And the Council of Constantinople discussed the broader issues of nationalism and its disruptive potential within Orthodoxy. The rise of national churches was seen as a threat to the unity of the faith, particularly in the diverse multi-ethnic Ottoman Empire. And the Council emphasized that Christ's church is universal, a body where distinctions of race and nationality are secondary to shared faith, even if you tend to enter the Orthodox Church through a door which is triggered by a particular language, a Russian door, a Greek door, a Romanian door, and so on. A Ukrainian door now. One of the peculiar aspects of the Council was the degree to which its deliberations were shaped by Ottoman political considerations. The Ottoman authorities, wary of growing nationalism among their Christian subjects, were keen to see the Patriarch maintain authority over all Orthodox Christians in the empire. And the irony was that a Muslim empire inadvertently played a role in shaping the Orthodox response to explosions of Christian nationalism. Additionally, debates within the council highlighted linguistic confusion, with representatives struggling over how to balance their pastoral concern for ethnic communities while condemning phyletism. Some bishops reportedly mocked the idea of parishes divided by menus, an ironic jab at the notion of dividing congregations by language or ethnicity, akin to a restaurant option. I must say, I'm always faintly amused in my local church that just before communion, the Lord's Prayer is recited in about 15 different languages by different groups around the church. I find that rather charming. But why is nationalism a heresy? First of all, it compromises the ecclesial unity of the church. The church is the body of Christ, a single, indivisible entity meant to unite all believers, regardless of ethnicity, language, or culture. The church has a universal mission, and nationalism prioritizes earthly allegiances over the church's universal mission to bring all people into communion with God. And thirdly, most importantly, it encourages sectarianism and division. Excessive nationalism fosters division within the church, undermining its spiritual mission and its canonical order. Now, the Orthodox Church isn't the only church to condemn nationalism. In the Catholic Church in 1963, the document Pacem in Terris and other encyclicals particularly warns against nationalism. The Second Vatican Council also warns against nationalism. Pope Pius XI explicitly denounced nationalism in 1937 in an encyclical, and modern popes, including Francis, have criticized xenophobia on the one hand, excessive nationalism on the other hand, and isolationism as antithetical to the gospel's call for love and solidarity. So it all goes back, in terms of the pronouncements, to the Council of Constantinople in 1872. That's a crucial moment in ecclesiastical history, not only for its condemnation of nationalism, phyletism, but for its broader warnings about the dangers of nationalism within the church, or within the churches. It highlights the perennial tension between faith as a universal mission and the particulars of human culture and politics. So whether Orthodox or Catholic, Christianity's message transcends national borders, insisting that allegiance to Christ outweighs all earthly identities. I've said nothing, incidentally, here about the Protestant traditions, and I should point out that many of the Protestant churches face severe struggles in Russia and slightly less severe struggles in Ukraine, but in Eastern Europe it is tough being a Protestant, I believe. But one should recognize a common bond, and that common bond can be shared with Muslims, Christians, Jews, Buddhists. And a common bond is the idea that there's something greater than the common humanity we share, and that sense of otherness, whether through the traditions of monasticism or the traditions of prayer or simply the traditions of silence, which I think is very important, hesychism. These are things which equally transcend the boundaries not only of nationalism but also the boundaries of individual faiths. There's so much more that we can learn by working together than we learn by working on our own.